Welcome to another Uni Ironworks Shipbuilding 101 video. This time we're covering the basic thrusters in the game, so triangle, box thrusters, as well as maneuvering thrusters. All of these thrusters have three different tiers, each of which has its pros and cons. And I'll also show some of the pros and cons between triangle and box thrusters. Also, for triangles and boxes, you have these converters. So there's an electricity converter and a propellant converter. They're not actually required for the thruster to function, but they do add a lot of efficiency to them. We've found that they're not so expensive that it's prohibitive to use them in the game, and so I just include them on every single one of my designs because there's not really much of a reason that I've found not to. Now, box thrusters consist of three core parts, so the body, the nozzle, and the combustion chamber. So let's put those guys together. And then I'm going to include these two converters, which slot into their color-coded slots. You'll notice a box thruster has two hard points, one on the wider flat side as well as the other wide flat side. You cannot attach box thrusters together. They don't share resources, and so you would have to attach them from one side only in order to get them to go together like this. So I could only put pairs together, not any more stuck together like this. And so I'd have to have hard points on each one of them. Triangle thrusters are built very similarly to the box thrusters. The difference is the body is called a base, but the combustion chamber goes inside just like the box thruster, and the nozzle goes on the end. And the two converters are optional but provide a pretty significant amount of efficiency. There's also a resource sharing point, which is this symbol right here on the side, and you'll notice there's one on every side. Oops. And those allow you to place the triangle thrusters together to share resources. And I could copy this on over and over again on any side that I like and make all kinds of interesting designs out of them. Now, the hard points go on a hard point just like you would expect. Kind of ignore the fact that there's a cutout. Now, a trick to put these together is on your toolbar on number 7 you have a snapping tool. When you select a piece, you'll see little orange dots, and you can select any one of those and they'll turn green. And so you'll go from that point to another orange point that you select. And now I've taken that piece and snapped it between the two orange dots to that other piece. And this helps me know that I've lined up the center of that hard point to the center of the hard point on the thruster. Especially on triangle thrusters, that's handy because they kind of overlap a lot, and you can get them in some weird positions that you might think it's connected, but it's not, and then you put your whole ship together and then realize you have to redesign it by just a few centimeters, and that can be very frustrating. And finally, maneuvering thrusters, one piece, snaps right on, and you're done. Very easy. For all three of the basic thrusters, there's three tiers. Tier 1 is the basic, most easy to obtain materials, perfectly adequate tier. Tier 2 adds a little bit of performance and quite a bit of efficiency. So Tier 2 is probably your go-to tier once you start getting a good amount of materials and you can build those parts. Tier 3 requires much more difficult to obtain materials and adds a pretty significant boost in performance at the cost of efficiency. It's much less efficient than the other two tiers, and that goes again for all three thrusters. You'll also notice that box thrusters have better thrust than individual triangle thrusters, but placing multiple triangle thrusters together creates better performance at the cost of additional resources. Another minor detail I'd like to point out is in order to obtain your warp class, you'll need to put a thruster on your ship frame. And by warp class, I mean using your durability tool to select your frame and seeing that text around the center of your entire ship frame. Now in the patch this week, they seem to have changed that to ship strength factor. But just know that those are kind of the same thing if you're looking at some other older videos out there. Warp class or ship strength factor. And a factor of 1.0 or higher means your ship can fly. That doesn't mean it doesn't have issues, it just means it can fly. And so you need the frame in combination with at least one thruster. Obviously, this thing isn't going anywhere, but it does give me that data point. Now, your flight control unit, which I'll draw on right here, has little arrows on it and it points in a certain direction. And that's what helps give your entire ship a point of reference in which all of your inputs affect the control over your thrusters. And that's what determines kind of the flight model for your particular ship. The center of thrust and the center of mass are important because you want them to be in line. Your thrusters are going to push against that center of mass. So in this case, you'll notice it was in line horizontally, but vertically it's actually, the center of thrust is actually above the center of mass a bit. And what that means is that it's actually going to push down on the center of mass given forward flight input. And that's going to be a problem because something's going to have to compensate for that, whether that's other maneuvering thrusters or the thrust on, say, the top box thrusters here is going to have to be reduced because they're more above the center of mass, whereas the bottom box thrusters are more in line with it. So those are probably going to get a lot more input from the flight unit because they're going to provide for a lot more stable flight. Now here's a live demonstration of the same thing I was just discussing. You'll notice that the maneuvering thrusters on the aft of the ship are firing on the top, which is going to force the nose up a bit. And also the maneuvering thrusters at the front of the ship are firing on the bottom side, which is also forcing the nose up. And that's compensating for the fact that there's another set of box thrusters forcing the ship forward over its center of mass.